Okay, let's see if I can do that.
So as Sean said, the format of the webinar is that Phil and I are going to do a presentation, share a presentation, and then the most important part perhaps of the session is the opportunity for people to ask questions, and we'll try and answer them as best we can. But we thought it would be useful by starting off just to give you an idea of what we're going to cover during the next sort of 20 minutes or so, our agenda, so to speak. First and foremost, what is progressive MS? We'll talk about the challenges of living with progressive MS, some of which, of course, are common to everybody with MS, and perhaps some of them are a little bit more specific to those of us with progressive. The million-dollar question, does the Overcoming MS program work for people with progressive MS? And I'm going to give you a spoiler alert right now. The answer to that is yes. We'll talk a bit more about our own experiences of overcoming MS, following the OMS program in our lives. And then, as I say, first, last but not least, this opportunity for everybody to ask questions or to make comments about the session. And if we don't get through everybody's questions this morning, we'll be able to answer some people by email and point you in the direction on the website for answers. So with no further ado, I'm going to hand over to Phil, who is going to talk us through actually what is progressive MS.
Okay, thanks, Helen. So I'll just go on to the next slide. Yeah, so what is progressive MS and how's it different? The diagram you can see on the left side of the screen there is that kind of classic picture of what happens in MS, and that's the one we've all seen over the years. The picture of the neuron with the axon, the wire coming from the neuron that's covered in the insulating myelin layer, and the myelin gets attacked, gets damaged by the inflammatory attacks. And that's kind of the picture we almost all have of what's going on with MS. But that's only part of the picture. And that's very applicable to relapsing remitting MS, but not for us with progressive MS. So the mechanisms that underpin the condition for progressive MS are very different. And I searched for a long time, and I looked through literally dozens of academic journals for a similar picture of what goes on in progressive MS that I could bring up and show you just quickly as to say what happens in progressive MS, and there isn't one. And the reason for that is progressive MS is really complicated. So there are a number of different mechanisms, a number of different pathways that actually cause a loss of function, that cause the progression of the condition. Some of these are actually we get demyelination, but not caused by inflammation. The cells that produce the myelin, the oligodendrocytes, those are attacked, those atrophy. We lose gray and white matter when we have progressive MS, and there are a huge number of other pathways through that actually the condition takes, not all of which have probably even been identified yet. So it's a really complicated condition. So I was looking for a picture as to what goes on, and the kind of, I guess, following the idea that picture counts for 1,000 words. And maybe the best picture I've got is this, because this is really what happens in progressive MS. We lose gray matter more rapidly than general population. So our brains atrophy, they shrink much faster. They estimate about 3 times faster than the general population. So effectively our brains are almost aging faster than the general population. So that's what's going on. And I say it's still really, really complicated. And what is even MS? And I saw I saw a paper about a year ago that presented MS as a kind of a spectrum with 2 key components: an inflammatory component caused by the body attacking itself effectively, and a progressive degenerative component. And we then sit somewhere on this spectrum. So you see that little graph there, and you can almost imagine time going along the x-axis there. So we almost move from the left-hand side to the right-hand side as the condition progresses. So early on, typically in the relapsing remitting phase, there's the inflammatory component of the condition is more prevalent. As the condition progresses and we get older, the degenerative component becomes more important. And what some scientists and some neurologists actually say is that for us with primary progressive MS, the inflammatory component is actually subclinical. It's asymptomatic, so we don't even see that happening. And similarly, for those with relapsing remitting MS, there is also a degenerative component even early on in the condition, which is one of the reasons why a lot of people with relapsing remitting MS are now being given some quite aggressive treatments, things like ocrelizumab, to support the condition, because scientists and neurologists becoming more aware that we need to hit the condition early and really quite hard to prevent the early stage degeneration. So it is that there's an awful lot going on, and it's still scientists are really quite unsure as to what comes first. Does the inflammatory component come before degenerative component, or is it vice versa? So there's what's called the outside-in model. So it starts with the body attacking itself, or actually does it start with the degenerative components? And so there's still lots of discussion amongst neurologists as to which one starts the condition. So it's still not clear. But even more than that, those kind of labels of well, let's see if I can change the slide, of relapsing remitting MS, secondary progressive MS, primary progressive MS are changing. Those labels were only introduced formally in 1996. And increasingly, the MS professionals, our MS neurologists and nurses, define the condition in terms of activity. So are we seeing relapses as evidenced by MRI scans, and or are we seeing progression as being shown by loss of function? And actually, those two kind of parameters actually dictate, certainly in the UK, what treatments are available to us. So I'm currently on ocrelizumab because I'm been showing, or I did about 3 years ago, both activity and progression. If I was only showing progression, I would not have qualified in the UK for ocrelizumab. So say it's really quite a complex condition that is still not firmly and fully understood by the neurologists. And I have to admit, I find this quite interesting. And I know Pat, who's dialed in from San Diego, also finds it, another PPMSer, also finds it very interesting. But maybe we're just quite anal. And actually, there's probably a much bigger question that's more relevant to us is actually what's the lived experience of being with a condition, a chronic degenerative condition like MS. And Helen, can I hand over to you to talk a little bit more about that?
Thanks, Phil. So we've seen from Phil's slide, it is a complex picture, and those subtypes defined in 1996, they may well be revised in the future, and we may well be applying different labels. But the fact remains that as of now, any diagnosis of MS is liable to be very difficult, very distressing. But if you're diagnosed with primary progressive MS, or if you're told that your relapsing remitting MS is transitioning into secondary progressive MS, these are the labels that are still used, you're being told that you face the prospect of loss of function, worsening symptoms over time. And of course, the pace at which that happens is very unpredictable, and it differs greatly from one person to the next. But I think this is compounded by this negative idea that somehow relapsing remitting MS is good versus progressive MS, which is bad. And this kind of notion is really pervasive in some of the conversation, certainly in the past, and I think it continues today around MS. And I really wanted just to say, that this is not accurate, it's not compassionate, and none of us, whatever our label, whatever our diagnosis, should accept a really false and unhelpful distinction, which is based in a kind of prejudice about what constitutes a good life and who is a strong person. I think one thing we'd like to very much stress this morning is our conviction that people with progressive MS have exactly the same capacity to care for ourselves and to manage our condition as anybody else in the MS population, and indeed that the Overcoming MS programme is as much for us as it is for anybody else. But we know there are particular challenges of being in a minority within the MS population. So people with a progressive diagnosis still constitute a relatively small number within the MS population at large. And as Phil has said, the underlying causes of progressive disease are complex. And because I think neurologists see fewer people with progressive MS, particularly primary progressive MS, they're less experienced, they're less in tune perhaps with its causes, and even with potential treatments and ways of managing. So we really need, those of us who have progressive MS, we really need to be and to find strong advocates so that we get the attention and support that we need. And of course, because we're in a minority within the MS population, of course, we're therefore also in a minority within the overcoming MS community. And at times, I think it's probably fair to say that relapsing remitting MS experience has perhaps been the sort of dominant conversation within the OMS community. But this is changing. This is already changing. And OMS is really determined to be a very inclusive space in which everybody's experience of MS is acknowledged and honoured. So although we may be small in number, our voice is growing and we're very much being heard within the overcoming MS conversation. I think one thing that we all have in common with a diagnosis of MS is uncertainty about the future. So if you have a relapsing remitting diagnosis, you are uncertain as to when you may or may not have another relapse and what will remission involve. If you have a diagnosis of progressive MS, you face, as we've said, the prospect of increasing loss of function and a disease burden over time. And again, the uncertainty is around what's going to happen and when it's going to happen and the challenges that brings. And I'm going to hand over to Phil, who's going to sort of flesh out some ideas around that particular uncertainty. Over to you, Phil.
Thanks, Helen. Thank you. Yeah, and Helen, I completely agree with you. I think you're right. It's regardless of the type of MS that you have, that we have, uncertainty is always there. Unpredictability is always there. But I do think, and I agree with you, that when you've got the progressive condition, there is more going on. I can see it. There's something about the unpredictability of the condition itself, what that does to me, and my relationship with others as well. So the condition itself, when there's the progressive form, potentially we are dealing with functional loss, with functional loss, with cognitive issues, with all the hidden symptoms, the bowel issues, the bladder issues that I'm sure lots of we could have hours of conversation about, the pain, the neuropathic pain that again isn't really often spoken about, but a number of people have and can be really quite debilitating and have a big impact on our lives. So there's just the physical symptoms of living with this condition that can be very tough. And what does that do to you as an individual? What if you can't work anymore, as I've had to do and Helen's had to do as well? You can't enjoy the hobbies, the activities you used to enjoy. What does that do to your identity? How does that change? How does it change your values? What's important to you? Can you still be happy? And how's this going to impact your relationship with others, with your partner, your friends, your work colleagues? So all these things become more unpredictable when we have this more progressive form of the condition and the progression of the symptoms themselves. So that is, so there's a lot we can do with it, but what is it? And maybe Helen, just to talk a little bit more about what can we do with that?
Thanks, Phil. So we've laid out some of the challenges, and perhaps it's all sounding a little bit bleak so far this morning. We know our brains are shrinking and all these things we have to contend with in life. But there is so much that we can do for ourselves. And I just wanted to introduce this part of the discussion under this heading of self-activation, which is an idea that may be familiar to some of you, but perhaps not to everybody. And it's a sort of really growing sort of trend and idea within healthcare systems in particular, where this is often talked about in terms of patient activation. And patient activation has been defined here in the UK by the King's Fund as the knowledge, skills and confidence a person has in managing their own health and healthcare. So it's not a new idea, but as I say, it has a kind of growing presence within many healthcare policy conversations, and indeed in practice. If you go onto your hospital website, you may well find a section on patient activation nowadays. But what's great for those of us involved with the OMS program is that OMS, Overcoming MS, is at the heart of this philosophy of this perspective on healthcare, the emphasis on self-management, what we can do for ourselves. And of course, healthcare providers like this idea because studies show, and I'm quoting again from the King's Fund in the UK, the quote is, highly activated patients are more likely to adopt healthy behaviour, to have better clinical outcomes and lower rates of hospitalisation. And they report higher levels of satisfaction with services. So that's looking at it very much from the sort of health provider point of view. But I think for people following the Overcoming MS programme, we know the self-activation doesn't only take place in the doctor's office, it's what we do in our everyday lives. Understanding that eating well, moving our bodies, managing stress, ensuring that we get as good sleep as we can. These are things that have a real impact on our health. So the evidence base for the Overcoming MS programme absolutely fits into this kind of picture of self-management. I think as well as taking care of ourselves by eating, moving, resting well, self-activation also involves feeling informed and confident when we make healthcare decisions, for example, when we're evaluating treatment options. So we need to be our own health advocates or find people who will be advocates for or with us. Advocacy within this space for people with MS is a relatively new strand of work within the Overcoming MS organisation, but we've put it as one of our really core goals for Overcoming MS under the heading of empowerment. And we really want everybody as part of within our community to feel empowered, to understand their own authority and expertise as people who are living with MS. And we want to give people the support to have that confidence, skills and knowledge to make the best decisions they can for managing their own health. And being part of the OMS community means that we don't have to do any of this by ourselves. And we'll come on to some exciting news about support for people with progressive MS within the OMS community during the course of this session. But I'm now going to hand over to Phil, who is going to ask the big question. Phil.
Yes, the big question. Indeed. Well, Helen, you've already stolen my thunder. You've already you gave everyone the answer right at the top of the webinar. So does the Overcoming MS program work for people with progressive MS? Yes. Simple short answer is yes. I think possibly we need to discuss what works means and explore that in a bit more detail. But I think if you'd asked me almost 8 years ago to the week, as I walked out of my retreat, the first OMS retreat I went on, which was the first retreat outside Australia and the US, so in 2013 here in the UK. And if you ask me at the end of that retreat, does it work for people with progressive MS? I might have said no, actually, because I'd had a brilliant week with some people who are actually on this webinar today. So hello, all my friends from the Laund Abbey retreat back in 2013 who are here today. But yeah, so when I walked out, I had a wonderful week with George Jelinek and his wife Sandra, with Leon and Craig Hazard. They talked all the wonderful things about OMS, and they showed me lots of evidence about how OMS was really great at reducing relapse rates, but they said nothing about people with progressive MS. So I thought, well, I've never had a relapse. So is this going to make any difference for me? And I genuinely didn't know. So fast forward to now, and seeing how it's worked for me over the last number of years, how it's worked for others, seeing some of the more recent research, I'm absolutely convinced that yes, it does make a difference. We can absolutely kind of affect the trajectory of the condition by following OMS, by eating well, by looking after our brains, by looking after our minds, by exercising. We can absolutely make a change to the trajectory of the condition. And to me, that's really what working for people with progressive MS means. We're affecting the trajectory. We can change that trajectory, and we can recover some loss function. And how do the different sort of steps work? I'm just going to dig into a little bit more detail just very quickly. To me, actually, exercise is possibly the most important one. And there's now a huge amount of exercise, of evidence that exercise makes a massive difference to people with MS, and in particular, people with progressive MS. So you get the quotations as from Gavin Giovannoni on the right-hand side that exercise almost should be treated as a form of DMT for people with MS. And there's loads of evidence now that we can slow symptom loss, we can recover function by exercising. We can develop new neural pathways in our brains. We can relearn how to move correctly, posture patterns, even walking. Exercise is also tremendously great at protecting our brains. And you hear, I'm sure you hear in the news about how it's good for other degenerative conditions, Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's disease, all recommend that people exercise. It's exactly the same for us. Exercise also improves just how the synapses work in the brain. So there's a lot we can do to protect the brain through exercise. But what type of exercise? And for me, again, particularly for people with progressive MS, it's less about the what you do. Should it be cardio or functional training or strength training, but more about the how. So it's not like being like Arnie there on the right-hand side, trying to get that last rep out of his very heavy incline bench. It's about finding something that you enjoy doing, something that motivates you, that enthuses you, because it's most important you do something. And if you are exercising to relearn function, then form is really important. It's not about exercising to get the last rep out or going for that last 100 meters or 10 meters or 5 meters walking. It's about keeping the form good. Being kind to yourself once you do it, being safe, and trying not just to judge, comparing to what you can do now to what you used to be able to do. I've certainly spoken to people who almost just refuse to exercise because they're just exercising reminds them of what they now can't do, and that's really upsetting. So we need to not judge. And then kind of linked to that, it's just how we hold goals. We still need them, but potentially just hold them more lightly, more gently when we do have this more progressive chronic condition. So exercise, I think, is really important. Looking after the brain and our stress levels is also massively important. I don't think we've unfortunately got time here to do a poll of looking at the effects of stress. And if any of you have found a link between stress and your MS symptoms, I know I certainly have. And if you wish to do a thumbs up to indicate, I'm sure we can get Sophie or Shant to have a look at that and clock those answers up. But generally, the research shows there is a causal link between stress and exacerbation of MS symptoms. Now, OMS recommends meditation, but there are lots of things that we can do to look after our stress levels. Exercise, yoga, join one of Veronique's yoga classes, just getting some fresh air, reading, listening to music, painting, having a hobby, lots and lots of different things we can do to help manage down our stress levels. That being said, meditation and mindfulness meditation, I think, really helps. Because for me, living with progressive MS, there's so much of it it's a head game. It's about sorting out my head, certainly. And when we spend so much time living on our heads, again, particularly with a degenerative condition like this, we kind of perhaps worrying about the future or making judgments about what we've done in the past. I mean, to live with new norms all the time, and it's hard. We spend so much time thinking about this stuff. So mindfulness can help with that. And actually, mindfulness, yes, it can help us just relax during the time when we meditate, but actually it's more important we then apply it to our day-to-day lives. It's actually a tool to live with, being mindful on the day-to-day. Helps with our attention, helps with our awareness, helps us just to sometimes step back from what's going on, to reframe situations. It's certainly helped me deal with and it's changed the relationship I have with the condition. So rather than kind of fighting it or trying to escape from it, I've very much learned to accept it. You still need strength and you still need to be determined, but accept this is what's there. And I think kindness is another key word. And to me, mindfulness and kindness really are synonymous. And I think any mindfulness course that you do should have kindness at the heart of it. And I think bringing that kindness, that compassion to ourselves, to the condition, it's such a key part of it. So perhaps Helen, I'll turn over to you now. Talk a bit more about that.
Thanks, Phil. Yes, we wanted just to sort of really emphasize this idea of self-compassion as we're sort of coming towards the end of our presentation, because I think Phil and I both feel that this concept of self-compassion, the practice of self-compassion, really is at the heart of living well with a chronic condition like MS. What does this mean in practice? Well, for many people, a serious diagnosis, like a diagnosis of MS, can make us ask the question, what is important to me? What makes me happy? So we can, if we possibly can, use this as an opportunity to re-identify our values and our goals in order to feel more in control and to help us change our behavior so as to benefit our health and also to increase our enjoyment of life. There's a lot of research, in fact, that shows that people who experience life-changing diagnoses, for example, these traumatic events can actually trigger an appreciation of life, setting new priorities, increasing personal strength, identifying new possibilities. And I think the key thing to remember here is that the pleasure that we take in life doesn't come from the absence of distress. We can still enjoy life if we know what gives us pleasure. We can make a space for it as part of our self-care. But as Phil has said, living with a condition like progressive MS involves many challenges. Adapting to those successive changes in what we can and can't do, recognizing the loss of some mobility, dexterity, or energy that we might have had in the past. And we know that doing this alone is really hard. So something that we can each do for ourselves is to build and to find our own support team that can help us. This may be family and friends, but there are many resources for people with MS within the Overcoming MS community. The exciting news is, as of today, we're launching a new circle for people specifically with progressive MS. So if you have progressive MS, whether it's primary progressive or secondary progressive, wherever you are in the world, there is a new online circle of members of the OMS community like you that you're very, very welcome to join. We're going to give details of that on a handout, which will be posted online after the webinar. So it's there for all of us who want to join in that conversation with fellow progressive MSers following the OMS program. On a different note, I just wanted to also raise this concept of toxic positivity, because I think it's something that many of us living with a condition like MS encounter when other people tell us, to think positively, to sort of almost dictate our emotions. And I think it's really important that we find a space in a conversation which can acknowledge our difficult emotions, our negative emotions, as well as our positive ones. So we're really looking for support among people who validate how we feel, as well as encouraging us and supporting us. And finally, I just wanted to say, and this is probably stating something very obvious to many of you here today, pacing ourselves is so important, isn't it, when we're living with a condition like this, and acknowledging that we need to lead life, and we can lead life at a different pace each day and every day. But if we manage our energy budget every day, every week, every month, carefully and with self-awareness, in fact, we find that we can build energy and that we can do more. And it's a much more effective way of conserving and using energy than the sort of boom and bust, sort of crash and burn of doing too much and then not having anything left in the tank, and just feeling completely exhausted. So lots of ideas, some advice, so to speak, but we thought we'd just wrap up by saying a few more words just from the heart of each of us about our own experiences of overcoming MS. And Phil, over to you first of all.
Yeah, and shall I just stop the presentation now, Sean? Helen should just do that.
Great.
Let's just do that now. See my mouse, I've got the sunlight coming through the window. I can't see anything. Okay, good. Yeah, so what's my experience of overcoming MS? Yeah, so I think I said at the beginning, it took me about 4 years after diagnosis to actually start to actually adopt the Overcoming MS program. So say starts in 2007. I was kind of exploring it in 2011 and 12, and although I had some initial progression after adopting the program, I was really strict. Then going on the retreat, extremely strict, and I saw some real improvements. We even within 12 months, which I think is quite unusual. So I was really fortunate. I had really quite bad foot drop prior to the retreat. That really recovered. My walking got a lot better, so it was great, and my kind of overall progression seemed a lot slower, and that felt great, and that carried on for a number of years. But over the last 2.5, 3 years, I've had a number of UTIs, and just one after the other. And I'm sure a number of you can relate to this, that every time I have a UTI, my sort of function drops off. I mean, one time I was hospitalized because of it, but generally it puts me in bed for a few days. Then it takes me a while to recover, build up function again before then the next UTI hits. And as they're actually getting more frequent and seemingly in some cases more severe, my recovery time is just taking longer, and I'm not getting back up to almost the pre-infection levels again. It's just not getting there. So I'm actually at the moment seeing quite a lot of progression. So my norms, my kind of just my norms of function have been all over the place recently. Certainly the last couple of years, and it's tough to be honest at times, and really frustrating because I haven't changed my lifestyle program at all. I'm still 100% diet. I still meditate. Possibly my meditation is better than ever it has been. I still exercise and do everything I can. So I'm not going to pretend that just by following OMS, it's going to make living with progressive OMS always easy, because it's not. Sometimes it's not. This is a chronic degenerative condition, and it is hugely unpredictable. So even with OMS, we need sometimes that strength and determination and support that Helen talked about, and some compassion to ourselves. But I'm utterly convinced that I'm doing everything I can possibly do to slow progression, to recover the function where I can. And I think just the motivation I get by taking some control of my own health and well-being, by following OMS, and the support I get from the OMS community, and I think also importantly, the awareness and insight I get from my mindfulness practice just help me live just more lightly, at ease with the condition, and still really enjoy life. So to me, that's my experience of overcoming MS. Helen,
Thanks,
I'll
Phil.
return.
Thank you. So, as I say, I was diagnosed in 1997. quite a long time ago, nearly 25 years. And I guess I started following the Overcoming MS program sort of pretty soon after the first books were published by George Jelinek, so back in the 2000s. And really it's become a framework for my daily life. I've never been eligible for any disease-modifying therapy or drugs in the UK healthcare system. So in a sense, Overcoming MS is my healthcare program. And like Phil, I feel very empowered by following the program, because I feel I am taking responsibility and managing my own health to the best of my ability. And in a way, I'm not really relying on anybody else, to hand me a sort of a wonder drug or anything like that. And I always regard Overcoming MS not as a book of rules, but as a kind of toolkit. And to be honest, I really enjoy following the program. Now, to what extent can I say there are sort of palpable health benefits from it? It's very difficult. I've had a fairly sort of slow, steady trajectory in terms of losing function over the years. I haven't had too many sort of fits and starts or ups and downs. And I've adapted along the way to my changing capacity. And to be honest, I don't really think to myself, ooh, how different would it be if I wasn't following MMS? How different would it be if I could take a drug that would help me? I just lead the life that I lead. And it's not always easy. I get angry and frustrated like everybody else. But by and large, I actually enjoy my life enormously. And nowadays, I self-identify as disabled. And yeah, there are some things I can't do, but there are even more things that I can do that I enjoy greatly. So that's, and I think we're all so different, but we thought it might be, possibly interesting just for each of us to talk quite personally about that. So I think enough from us. Thanks, Phil. And I think
Thank you, Helen.
Sean's going to take us into the Q&A.
Hi both. Thank you so much. We've had some really lovely comments actually, and just wanted to share with you that we've had about 147 people joining us so far. So some dipping in and out, I guess, for connection issues, but a really interesting presentation, and absolutely love the chemistry between the two of you. Felt like I was drinking my coffee, observing like two friends chatting away. But also just thank you for your honesty and sharing your personal experiences as well with us, and hopefully a lot of people will be able to relate to a lot of what you've said. So on that note, we've had lots of questions posed obviously before the webinar, but also they've been coming through thick and fast. So we'll try and get through as many as we can. And like we said earlier, we'll pick out the top 10, add them to our FAQs that are on the website. And I have to hold my hands up because at the beginning you were rudely interrupted, Phil, because the record button hadn't worked. So I'm really sorry, Helen, but we missed your intro right at the beginning. But so I'm just going to note that, because if people are going to be watching this back, they're going to wonder what happened at the beginning. So
have we got to do take two and do the whole lot again now?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Okay, so you happy to start answering some of these lovely questions that come through? Brilliant. Okay, so the first one I'm going to ask Phil. Somebody asked, I'm experiencing constant symptoms and issues with mobility and balance, which are getting worse with time. Could this be primary progressive MS? Definitions and descriptors of a relapse are very vague, and any guidance would be much appreciated.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously very hard to diagnose, and I'm not a neurologist, but certainly from what I've read, generally the continuous loss of function is associated with progression rather than relapses. So to me, that does sound like the progressive component of the condition that is going on there. Kind of goes back to that slide that I put up during the presentation, where there's a kind of the demyelination component, the inflammatory component and the degenerative progressive component of the condition. Often it's the progressive degenerative component that causes functional loss, which is what that sounds like. But that being said, there's lots of things that can be done to recover some function. So I'd certainly recommend to that person they did look at doing some sort of functional training, perhaps getting a neurophysio, get them to walk through some of their mobility issues, work through their balance issues, because those, I think, really outdated ideas now that we can't do anything about it. Once it's lost, and it's gone forever, are incorrect. They are wrong. And it's not just me saying this. There's lots of evidence out there. You listen to the MSG when you hear Trevor Wicken going on about this all the time. But we can reprogram our brains. We can use the neuroplasticity in our brains to recover some function. So that would be my recommendation to that.
Thank you, Phil. Helen, I'm going to come over to you now. So as somebody living with secondary progressive MS and disabling neuropathic pain, I find it hard to get the support or the attention it deserves. What are your thoughts and advice in this area?
Well, my first thought is massive sympathy, because I think living with any, pain, whether it's acute or chronic, can be so tough. So, my heart goes out to you. And I think neuropathic pain, which is the pain that people with MS can experience directly from the nerve damage, which is different from musculoskeletal pain, which probably has other sort of secondary causes, as it were. This is a tough one. And I would say, your neurologist may or may not be the best person to help you with this, but certainly within, say, the UK health system, there are a lot of pain specialists now. So it may well be worth asking for a referral from your GP or from your neurologist to a pain clinic or to a pain specialist. And these are services which helping people with pain, either through medication or other kinds of treatment, whatever the underlying condition is, and not just people with MS. So I would certainly say seek out whatever pain management resources are available to you through your local system. Some people find acupuncture very effective for neuropathic pain. Acupuncture is not part of the Overcoming MS program, but it's a well-researched form of complementary therapy, and it may be worth exploring. But I'd also say, as far as Overcoming MS is concerned, don't forget mindfulness can play a part here. I mean, there is some evidence which suggests that meditation can, in fact, help to alleviate the experience of pain. But even if you find it doesn't alleviate the direct experience, it can help to shift our response to pain. So it can enable us to perhaps accept and acknowledge pain without the frustration, the depression, the negative feelings, the charge which is inevitably attached to pain if we just have that sort of just the feeling of it without any sort of process to help us work through it. So I would say certainly think about how meditation can help, and there's a lot of material available, resources. If you did a web search on mindfulness or meditation and chronic pain, there's a lot of people who've worked in that area, and you may well find some very helpful resources, I think.
Thank you, Helen. I'm going to come back to you, Phil. So somebody's asked a question who's been following the RMS program for almost 8 years and has secondary progressive MS. So they did a week-long retreat and was inspired by the experience. The group has stayed in touch, but they've had different experiences of the program, which is interesting. So those, some are doing really well, and those of us with primary progressive MS have deteriorated. I'm finding it hard to rationalise this.
That it is tough, and I again completely empathise with that person. Very hard to deal with, and so it goes back to, I think, maybe what I was saying about, does OMS work Yes, it does work, and it works in slightly different ways for those with relapsing remitting MS and those with the progressive form of the condition. And it is, I mean, just to bring my own kind of real example to this, I'm having a few Zoom calls at the moment with Veronique and Jack McNulty, and we've all got MS. We all follow OMS to the letter. Veronique recently completed a marathon. Jack has just come back from a week he spent walking around the Lake Zurich with his wife, which sounds lovely. And my walking is not even close to that. So it's interesting that we're all dealing with the same condition, but the symptoms and how it unfolds is very different. Is it because, and again, I'm not maybe think very quickly. Possibly when we are in the progressive phase, we've lost so much neurological reserve that actually really stopping, resolving all symptoms is possibly not achievable. And what we're really looking at doing is affecting the trajectory. And to me, that's what OMS working really means when we've got progressive MS, particularly when you've got some accumulated loss of function, both cognitive and physical.
Okay, thank you. Helen, question about which of the OMS recommendations are relevant for secondary progressive MS? This person has secondary progressive MS and has been following the programme for about 6 years and has always wondered if the recommendations, including those specifically related to diet, are helpful in secondary progressive MS.
Thanks, Sean. I suppose the quick answer would be yes. And I think those of us who follow the Overcoming MS programme, people often talk about finding one aspect of it a bit more difficult than another. You know, some people find the diet tricky, some people find, you know, meditation quite a challenge, others find exercise, you know, the biggest challenge. But I think we would all say that really the programme works as a whole. You know, each element of the programme has been sort of carefully researched and designed to kind of fit together. So I would say, yes, it's the whole programme which is useful. And as I hope we've sort of explored in different ways this morning, it is as useful for people with secondary progressive as with any other kind of MS. As Phil has said so clearly, you know, it may work in slightly different ways, and one's experience of living with SPMS and doing the OMS program will be very individual to the person concerned. But certainly diet is you know, just as helpful, I would say, for SPMS as for any other form of MS. It's a good healthy diet, so you know, you can't go wrong in that sense. But also, you know, avoiding eating saturated fat, we know is not only good for us in terms of avoiding inflammation, it's also helpful in terms of slowing or helping avoid neurodegeneration. So that's very relevant to anybody with progressive MS as well. So it may work slightly differently, but yes, if you can, I would say stick with it.
Thanks. I'm going to, just because of time, I'm going to make this the last question, sadly. Like I said, we will follow up. So Phil, just finishing with you, we've got a question here. I was diagnosed about 2 years ago. My only symptom, is walking like I'm drunk and balance, no pain or other things. I'm on Ocrevus twice a year and would love to get your opinion on if there's anything I could do to improve walking or other thoughts. And then just sort of following on from that, we've had a question today regarding exercise. What if one is so unwell and limited that walking is no longer possible?
Yeah. Okay. So I addressed both of those, and so if the walking is a problem, I think it also goes back to Helen's point as well. It's the whole of the OMS approach does make a difference. So yes, there are specific things that can be done to look at relearning how to walk better, to relearning your balance and how to do that, which will really help with that kind of drunk style walking. to do more of that. But it is looking at the program as a whole. So diet can make a difference to this. The mindfulness practice, keeping our stress level down can make a difference. Exercise, absolutely, and particularly with the functional training, using something like a neurophysiotherapist to help with that can make a huge difference. But it's also the support that I think we need, that OMS offers, that we can get from also from our friends, from our families, from the new circle that's just been set up, that we only heard about this morning just before the call. So that's great that's been done. Can support all of that too. And there is absolutely evidence that it can make a difference, that you can improve the walking. I've seen it personally. There's lots of evidence out there on the web, other people who have done this too. So definitely possible to do, but it helps looking at the approach as a whole to do that. And sort of the second part of the question, Sian, you were saying was?
They said, what if one is so unwell and limited that walking is no longer possible?
Yeah. So that again, there's lots of exercise in a chair that can be done, exercise on the ground that we've done. So I'm actually a member of the MS gym, and I'm following a seated program at the moment. So all the exercises I do with Trevor, I do them religiously every day. At the moment, they're either seated or on the ground. You don't even need to move. You can do isometric exercises in which you're clenching antagonistic muscles. So your arms, you're clenching your bicep and your triceps. Your arm isn't actually moving, but you're still exercising. You're still putting pressure on the skeletal structure, on the muscles, and your heart rate's still going up. So there is still an awful lot that can be done from a functional perspective without standing up, even without moving. So it's just a case of finding something that works for you and sticking to it and keeping the form good. And that goes back to the previous question about what can I do to improve my walking. It's again just being really strict with that form, because we are teaching the brain new ways. We're finding ways around those broken axons, the loss of neurons, to enable us to walk again, to get that balance back. And it's definitely possible to do.
Thank you both. Just wanted to check, is there any other final thoughts that you'd like to share with us? Please do, Helen. Yeah.
Could I just add one thing? Because I asked Veronique Gauthier, who is our sort of resident exercise expert at OMS, exactly the same question this time a year ago when I was on a webinar as part of the audience. And I said to Veronique, don't tell me to climb a mountain or run a marathon. What can I do? And she said, listen, start with the breath and don't underestimate the power of the breath. Even if you feel, you cannot move a limb, you can breathe and work with the breath. Start with what you can do and don't, as we've said, sort of focus on what you can't do. And I've held by that for the last year. It's often in my mind her good advice, and it's an important point, I think.
Thank you. Phil?
Yeah, and just again, well, I mean, almost thanks to OMS for asking Helen and I to do this talk today, because it feels like this is almost the launching platform for a whole new way of looking at progressive MS within OMS. The fact we've got the circle set up today. We've got so many people here on the webinar today. There's a big community of us out there with progressive, be it secondary or primary, that for whom sometimes OMS feels quite hard, but it really can make a difference. And to have this support community together, I think is fantastic. And I'm just so looking forward to this and how this is going to evolve and unfold over the next few months, next few years. So it's good. It's thank you very much, OMS. It's a pleasure being here today.
No, I mean, thank you both so much. It's been a very insightful, thought-provoking, but it's just felt very sort of warm and comfortable listening to you both. And I'm sure our attendees have felt like that as well. So just a really big thanks from all of us at OMS for your time, and it's been such a great session. Please do feel free to stay with me while I just do a bit of finishing off and before we let people go. So just want to say, yeah, watch this space for future episodes as part of the Finding Hope with OMS season. We are going to be taking a little break in August, but we'll be back in September. And we're sort of formatting the content really in response to the feedback that you give us. So please do, if you're already logging off, leaving us, please do fill in that survey, because we've got such great insight in terms of how we're doing, what you want to hear about. You will receive the follow-up email, of course, tomorrow directly from Zoom, which will have the link on it, which will take you back to the webinar page, so you can replay this session, you can replay the introduction to the MS program. All the other information is going to be on there. So the handout, a copy of the PowerPoint presentation. And then one thing I have to plug today, and we're really excited about, is also the launch of our RMS engagement survey, which went out yesterday. We hope that you've received that via email. If you haven't, there will also be a link in the Zoom email that will come out tomorrow. Of course, visit our website. We really, really want to hear from our RMS community about how we can support and do better for you. So it's really your opportunity to have your say. It is a bit of a beast. We do say that, we are quite upfront, but grab yourself a cuppa and take the time to really tell us what you want to tell us, because we definitely want to hear it. And of course, you can continue to support RMS by listening to our podcasts, signing up for our e-newsletter, and obviously visiting the website for all that information that we've got there. And like I said, there is a pop-up survey that will appear as you leave the Zoom webinar. Please do take the time, if you've got it, to tell us what you thought of the webinar and any feedback that will help us to improve the future. With that note, I'd like to say another thanks to Helen and Phil. It's been a great session. Thank you everybody for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day, evening, wherever you're joining us across the world. So thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone.